What's up, guys? It's been a while. Just wrapped up training at United on the 737, released to the line, off to reserve I go. Haven't been able to make many Cub and/or Chief videos because I was in training basically since the middle of September. My class date was the middle of September, and it was a little under 2 months for training to get wrapped up. Usually the schedule was like 5 on, 2 off with a couple breaks in between where I was able to come home. I'll talk a little bit about that, but if you're wondering why I haven't made any new videos, that's why. And I talked about leaving Spirit, or thinking about leaving Spirit a while ago, and I'll drop a link for that video. Where I kind of just talk about, hey, I'm at Spirit, financials aren't looking all that good, I'm super senior, don't really want to start over again, and here I am actually starting over again. Made the decision, made the jump. Spirit has since filed bankruptcy, so it appears as though I made the right move for now. At least that's what everybody tells me, but I think Spirit's going to be fine. I don't think they're going anywhere. Chapter 11 is pretty common in the industry. Matter of fact, I think every single airline, with the exception of Alaska and Southwest, have filed Chapter 11 before. And what's interesting about Spirit's Chapter 11 actually is, for now, based on the email that their CEO sent out, the contract, which is the work rules, the pay and the benefits that Spirit pilots work under, is not going to be touched. And that's for now anyway. That's pretty rare from what I understand in the airline industry. I've been flying with the airlines since 2005, and every bankruptcy since then, the contract is usually amended quite significantly. Work rules are taken out, pay cuts, so on and so forth. So it's different this time, at least from what it appears. So that's really good for my Spirit brothers and sisters, and it's good for everyone in the industry. So anyway, I made the jump. So far, I'm incredibly happy with the move. It is kind of that honeymoon period. Now that I'm done with training and I'm actually going to be released to the line as a super junior FO, there's definitely going to be some bumps along the road. And so, again, honeymoon period. We'll see how it turns out. For now, I'm incredibly happy with the decision. I've got 26 hours in the 737, so I can talk a little bit about kind of flying that airplane in reference to what I think of it compared to the bus. But again, I think a lot of the changes, to me, an airplane is an airplane. They each have their own way of climbing, descending, whatever. I think the biggest change was going from the left seat of the Airbus to the right seat of a 737, where you have a position where you don't do much but call for checklists, and you're kind of looking over the grand scheme of things as a captain, to going to a first officer where you are doing loading the box, the flight plan, the walk around, flipping all kinds of switches on the overhead panel in the Boeing, which initially was quite overwhelming, but I gotta say, hand flying the airplane is, I genuinely really do enjoy it. It's cramped, it's loud, but it's fun to get back in there with the yoke and the actual throttles, pitch and power. So that's fun. I'll talk about that. Kind of made a list of things I'll go over. So again, I was at Spirit I was at Colgan 2005, 2006-ish, flying the Saab 340. Then I went to ExpressJet, which was Continental Express, flying the ERJ 145 out of Newark. Did that for about 8 years, and then Spirit from 2013 to basically September 20th, 23rd of this year, whatever it was. Upgraded at Spirit in just under 2 years, was a captain for a long time. Really enjoyed it. Planned on staying until I retired. COVID happened, market dynamics changed, business model not as successful maybe as it once was. So I made the decision that, hey, flying for United is something I've always wanted to do, but I was a father and a husband, and being financially more secure was more important to me than going to chase that childhood dream. Whatever. I talked about this before in my previous video, but I decided, hey, if I'm ever going to, pursue that dream of working for United, with Spirit looking towards filing bankruptcy at the time, United growing, doing really well financially, it's probably a good time to make the move. I did, and since then, like I said, Spirit has filed bankruptcy, but here I am, just wrapped up training. So the initial impressions of United, the interview process was as expected. Everything since then has, again, this is honeymoon period, so try not to vomit, okay? But everything has blown away my expectations from day one up until, my last flight with the line check pilot to get signed off on OE. It's been really incredible, guys. They go above and beyond to make sure that you have everything you need to be super successful in not only your job of flying the airplane, but making sure that everything's squared away with your family life at home, and really kind of prioritizing this family first mentality where everyone's looking out for each other. And that's just something that, not that I'm not used to, but it's just, for a huge organization, a huge airline, I think, matter of fact, the largest airline now, yeah, we all have employee numbers, but they really do seem to make an attempt to say, hey, you got something going on, let us know, let us help you through this process, we want you to be successful, and I definitely feel as though that was the case for training. Really great group of guys and girls, and I feel like most airlines do a good job of kind of mixing the backgrounds for classes. I think we had a class, it was like 40 or so people, and regional pilots, ton of military people, a bunch of ULCC pilots, fractional pilots, charter pilots, so kind of a wide range of experience, which I think is really good. At Spirit and at ExpressJet, it was a single fleet, so you didn't really you bid bases, but you didn't bid aircraft. Here, you have basic in-dock, which is basically 2 weeks long, and it's not airplane specific, it's more just company specific. Hey, these are the company policies, procedures, let's all kind of go through this together, because we have it's called an FOM, which is a flight operations manual, and that's not really airplane specific, that's just company specific, so that's what you go for. The class drop in my class was all narrow body. It was either Airbus or Boeing, 73, A320. So I'd say the past couple of years, they've had 777, 78, 75 available to all new hires, but my timing is not ideal. I kind of missed that massive hiring wave, as well as they did have some new hire captain vacancies, I believe, so you could hold captain in class, and then 6 months later, once you have 350 hours, you could go ahead and go to upgrade, and you were a captain, which would have been incredible for me to kind of make up for this huge financial hit. But I just missed that, but not a big deal. It gives me more time to kind of learn the airplane, learn the operation, so that's fine. But anyway, I got Newark, which is what I wanted. I think some other guys in my class got San Francisco, LA. I don't think anyone got Denver initially. Maybe they did, but anyone that isn't where they wanted to be initially, I believe they all base traded, except for one guy. Great guy, was at Delta for a year and wanted Newark, but the way the bid dropped, he kind of got stuck. I want to say he got stuck in Chicago on the Airbus, but he should be able to trade back into Newark. Great guy. Sorry that it happened to him, but that's the airline industry, right? So then after basic in-dock, we had basically initial fleet training, which is kind of an introduction to what to expect training down the line, kind of going over how to load the box, stuff like that. And then after that, we had almost 2 weeks of procedures where you kind of learn flows on the airplane. And for those that don't know, flows are essentially a memorized, I hate to say memorized checklist, but it's a memorized checklist that you do all of the things that are required for that specific flow, and then you verify it with the checklist. So for example, once the gate agent comes in, hands you the final numbers, the flow is we get the transponder on, get the hydraulic pumps on, and then we call for push. And then obviously all that stuff is verified via the checklist. So that's a flow, and you have to make sure you have the procedures down before you learn how to fly the airplane. So after your procedures are down, you go to maneuvers validation, which is really the fun part of training. Full flight sim, you do V1 cuts, steep turns, stalls, approaches, all that stuff, and it's really just kind of hand flying. And obviously you want to make sure you have the procedures down before you get into that phase of training. And then after that, it's the full flight sim loft stuff, which is line-oriented flight training, which is where you have a normal flight, and then you have emergencies and abnormalities, and they kind of talk about this crawl, walk, run thing. And initially, training is kind of slow, and they really make sure you know everything and kind of taking your time. And then it kind of really accelerates to the loft phase where you're expected to know, obviously, all of the procedures, as well as know how to fly all the maneuvers, all the call outs, stuff like that. And they did a great job of that, because I think there wasn't anybody in our class that didn't feel as though they were prepared. And interesting to note, I think when it came down to it, I want to say we had like 10 or 11 full flight sims at United, and that's not including the procedures phase where a lot of it was actually done in a full flight sim. And then we had our type ride. When I went through at Spirit, we had 4 sim sessions and a type ride. And it wasn't done via AQP, which is an advanced qualifications program. It was done like a normal PC. So I think back now, I kind of wonder how I was able to get through it with such little practice in the sim, but all of us made it through at Spirit, and it was fine, but it was just an incredibly abbreviated training program. And I kind of think that's why all these airlines really do like Spirit pilots, because if you can get through a bus training program in 4 sim sessions and a type ride, you'll have no problem succeeding with all these extra sim events and checks. So at least that's what I tell myself. Another thing that United did in training, which I thought was really special, is they had a wing ceremony. And listen, I get things like this cost money, and I get that United is doing really well now, and there was a time in the past where they weren't doing so well, and maybe they didn't do things like this. But the wing ceremonies, once you were done after basic and doc, they flew all your family in if they wanted to come in and witness you getting your wings. You go up, get a nice little diploma thing, get your actual wings, and it was really special. It was really, really nice. I never had anything like that at Colgan, ExpressJet, or Spirit. There was just nothing like that, and that's fine. I don't need that type of validation, so to speak. But it was just a really nice thing, I think, for us and our families. That being said, my family did not come out. But hopefully when I upgrade, hopefully relatively soon, I'm definitely going to have my wife and kids come out. But they didn't come out for this. Logistically, it was too difficult. But a lot of people's families did, and I just thought it was really, really special. Here's a picture, my class, as well as me receiving my wings. And I don't know, I felt like it was really, really cool. So again, I know some people are like, oh, I don't need that. That's kind of cheesy, and that's fine. Whatever. I enjoyed it thoroughly, and I'm glad that they do it, and it's something that I'm definitely going to remember for the rest of my time here. What else? Okay, so I think Boeing kind of has a bad rap because, yeah, the technology is really old, but, we're pilots. We're supposed to do that pilot stuff. And a lot of the things that the Airbus did automatically, it's done via us as the pilots. And for an example, kind of a minor difference, and it's a lot of very little minor things, but when you go and start the engine on the 737, you got to turn the packs off, you got to turn the ignition on, and then you start the engine. On the bus, there was one switch, you put it to ignition, and then you started the engine, and it would shut off the pack automatically, and then it would reopen the pack valve after the engine was started. Here, again, we just have to throw a couple manual switches. Not a big deal. On the Airbus, when you put flaps to 1, the slats went down, the ignition went on. Here, when we're coming in to land or before takeoff, we just put the ignition to continuous. Minor thing, but it's one more step that the pilot has to do, or has to remember to do, or verifies with a checklist. We don't use the auto throttles for landing at United, and that's not a Boeing specific thing. That's just a company specific thing, which is fine. It's kind of nice to get back and get back to that whole pitch and power thing and that pilot thing. I think my 4,000 or 5,000 hours at Spirit, and my 12 years at Spirit, I think I took the auto thrust off, less than 5 times, and I've never seen. I saw one first officer click the auto thrust off. That was kind of just not done at Spirit, and that's fine. Spirit encouraged you to click it off and actually hand fly the airplane, but it's not something that we did often. And Going back to the traditional yoke and, cables not 100% fly-by-wire, it is much easier to hand fly the 737 versus the Airbus. And an example that comes to mind is when you're leveling off, it just seems much easier for me to have a nice, smooth level off on the 737 versus the bus. And I think part of that is the bus auto trims for you, and there's no feedback on the stick. So, whether you're a heavy airplane, light airplane, fast or slow, it's, when you push the stick forward or back, you're requesting G load, and when you move the stick left and right, it's roll rate. So it just always felt a little twitchy to me on the Airbus. Whereas the 737, it's just more natural. Now everything else, I think the Airbus beats Boeing as far as creature comforts. The bus is much quieter. There's much more room. I'm short. I'm 5'7". I'm pretty small. And even I feel like the 737 is really tight. There's zero room behind me to put a bag. There's just a little area off to the left for both your bags, and that's pretty much it. And then you have your garbage bag here, and the rest of the room is taken up. There's just not much room, and it's louder for sure than the 737 than the Airbus. The 737 has VNAV. The Airbus does not have VNAV, at least not in the same fashion that Boeing does. So Boeing will start a climb, or once you change the altitude window in the MCP, once you reach that point, it'll descend automatically. On the Airbus, you could set a lower altitude and you could put an altitude restriction or fix, but the airplane's not going to do anything until you tell it to. So you would have to push for what's called a managed descent. I kind of like the modes on the Airbus more, and I think maybe just because I'm more used to it, but I like to do just an open descent on the Airbus or managed descent. Managed was, hey, think of it as let the airplane manage it. So if you have a fix, let's say you want to cross Somto at 11, you'd set 11 and you'd push the airplane and it would start and ideally intercept the path down at a predetermined speed that was usually bracketed, but whatever the case, it would get down and it would level off at 11,000. And if it couldn't do it, it would tell you and say, hey, drag required. The 737 is kind of similar. It's similar, I guess. It's just something that I'm going to have to get used to. It usually does a good job, but I've found in my brief 25 hours, I don't know if it's a box thing or if it's the airplane or what, but I feel like the 737 doesn't do it quite as good as the Airbus. The Airbus was pretty good. It would start down and it would do a nice job of having a constant rate descent, and it would meet the point. The 737, I feel like it's kind of hot. It's on the path, and then it'll go from VNAV path to VNAV speed, which means it's higher, and then the glide slope is way below you. Then you put the boards out. You maybe spin up the speed. I just feel like it's not as consistent. It might be operator error, but for those that have flown both, I'm interested in your opinion. I just feel like the Airbus did a better job of capturing that fix at a certain descent and a certain speed. I feel like it just did it better. I don't know. We'll see. Another thing that I noticed, and these airplanes are older than Spirit's Airbuses were, is you bring the power up, you let it stabilize on 40% or whatever it is, and then you set the thrust. I've seen 2 or 3 times already where one engine kind of lags. I don't want to say significantly, but it's noticeable where it lags when the thrust will come up slower or quicker on one engine versus the other. The Airbus, from what I've seen, didn't really do that. Maybe it did it once in my 12 years there. I've seen it maybe a little bit more. Not a big deal. I think the biggest difference with the 737 versus the Airbus are the speeds that we're coming in on. So my first flight ever, we did Newark to Atlanta. The captain took the leg, and then it was my leg from Atlanta to Newark. And what was cool about it is it was gusting to like 40 knots, crosswind in Newark, heavy rain, and the LCP, the line check pilot, was like, hey, listen, you take the airplane, you've got a ton of experience, and if you can't handle it, or we feel like, hey, this isn't working out, I'll take control, but let's just have you plan on doing the landing, which I thought was great. And I did, and I actually landed it fairly well. But the speed that we came in on, it was a max 9, was like $160 something. Okay, so on the Airbus we had this thing called ground speed mini, where if there was a real strong there's a real strong headwind. Initially, the approach speed, because we left the auto thrust on, it was really high, and then it would come down to basically meet your target speed when you're above the threshold, and it would do it automatically. Here, we put a wind additive in initially, and the target speeds are significantly higher, and it has nothing to do with the wing. It has everything to do with the length of the airplane and the potential for a tail strike. So you're coming in significantly faster than you aerodynamically need to be, but if you're too slow, you're going to require a pitch angle that is going to potentially strike the tail. So all of that equates to a much higher speed coming in, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because you've got more, flight control authority. The issue becomes, you've basically fly the airplane onto the runway, which is nice, but you touch down at 150, 160. That's a significant amount of energy that you need to get rid of via the brakes and no reverse thrust. You have a short, wet runway. You can't really mess that up. So again, normally on the 320, even like a heavy 321, you'd come in maybe high 140s maybe. On the 73, anything other than the 700, which was more like a 319, you're coming in significantly faster because the tail is just a tail strike threat there. And if you ever look at a Boeing, it just sits much lower than an Airbus. And when they first made the 73s, the 100s, 200s, they were really short, so the tail strike really wasn't an issue. So that is a big difference that I've noticed. But I feel like maybe not the MAX 9s or the 900 ERs, but the 7 and 800s, I feel like they climb a little better than the Airbuses did. I don't know. I mean, I feel like it has a better wing. We'll just leave it at that. What else? So I asked actually ChatGPT for some ideas to talk about. They talk about personal challenges and growth. I'm very aware, walking around the training center, there's a lot of young guys and girls that are thousands of numbers senior to me. And it's kind of a question they asked me in the interview. They said, hey, you're going to be an FO to some really less experienced younger guys and girls. And I was the captain for much higher time people that came over from DHL and Comair when I first upgraded at Spirit. So I knew it was kind of something to be aware of, and it's just eye-opening because I have that, I don't want to say that feeling in my stomach, but I definitely am aware that I probably should have made this jump much sooner. But it is what it is, right? I can't go back in time. I wasn't going to leave if the JetBlue merger went through. So there was kind of a 2-year period there where I just kind of stuck it out while United hired probably close to 6,000 people in those 2 years. And it is what it is. Nothing I can do about that. But as far as personal challenges and growth, I don't know. I don't think of it as a challenge. I think financially it's maybe going to be not even challenging. I've made money at Spirit, so we were able to save. I have 2 airplanes, so I'm not struggling or anything like that. But there's a significant difference between the paycheck than there was at Spirit. And that's just a numbers thing. It is what it is. It's something that I have to get used to. And it certainly isn't something that is exclusive to me. There's a lot of people that have to go through this. And there's a lot of people that went through bankruptcy, in the 2000s. So, I'm not going to sit here and play victim because I'm not. I made the choice to leave. It's just a challenge that I guess I have to overcome. And I will. And it's not a big deal. I just have to spend less money on camera gear. So there's that. But I think anytime you kind of face adversity or you have to do something that is scary and challenging, I think you always come out on the other side of it much stronger. So I don't know. I think it'll make me maybe look at things a little differently, and I hope that my girls see that, hey, if my dad could do something that was really hard and challenging, I could do it too. And they're young, and I don't think they quite get it, but maybe one day they'll kind of look back on and say, hey, that was cool that my dad took a leap of faith and pursued something that he thought was better for his career and his family. So we'll see how that goes. And it is kind of it is incredibly humbling. And I talked to the instructor about this. I said, hey, I feel like I'm not struggling, but this has been really challenging. The 737 going from the left seat of the bus to the right of the 737. I feel like, at Spirit and ExpressJet, maybe because I didn't have kids and I was younger, and it was, always a pay raise, and it was always super, super exciting. I just felt like it was a lot easier, where I felt like this was more challenging. But my instructor was like, dude, it's not you. Yeah, you're older. Yeah, you have kids and you have a lot going on. I think it's just the airplane. So that made me kind of feel good. I feel like if I would have gotten newer 320, this would have been like a vacation. But this was challenging. It was challenging in a good way, though, I think. So anyway, there's that. And actually, my sim partner, I couldn't have asked for a better sim partner. This guy was awesome. He's a full-time ALPA guy, which was great because I've done a ton of ALPA work. But he's been at United since 2000, so he's been furloughed twice. He's seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. So that was really cool to, anytime I thought, oh man, this is challenging, or I got to start over again, I thought, hey, the guy sitting next to me was as positive as can be. Awesome guy. I genuinely could not ask for a better guy. And he was furloughed twice. It took him forever to upgrade. So that's where my complaining stops. So it was nice to have that person in the left seat who also was on the 737 for a really long time. The 400s and the 500s. So he knew everything about the airplane, which made my job much easier. I felt bad for him because he was stuck with me, but it worked out. Great guy. So again, reflection on the Airbus versus Boeing. I like the airplane. It's me coming from liking a tail dragger that is a little bit more raw. I kind of assumed I would like flying the 737. The Airbus is definitely a much better office, but the 737, it's a lot of fun to fly. I don't know. I like hand flying it. So I'm happy about that. And the other thing too, on the Airbus, they have the there's an ECAM. So if something, if a bleed trips off or bleed overheats or whatever the case, it'll pop up and it'll say, hey, bleed overheat, and then it'll say, do this, do this, do this. So it tells you, the checklist is right there. It tells you what to do. On the 737, you get a warning light that says, electric, and then you have to look up on the electric panel, and then there's a light, and then you have to go hunt for what it is, because it could be many different things. So that's also a big change too. But I don't know. I like the airplane. One other challenge that I think, so now that I'm done with training, released to the line, learning the contract is going to be another challenge. So the benefit of United Airlines almost being 100 years old is the contract maturity. They've been around for a long time. They've had a lot of contract cycles to really fine tune the language, which is great because we've got a great contract. But it just reading the contract and understanding it for someone like me, I feel like you kind of have to be a lawyer to understand it, which it just makes it pretty complicated. But again, that's just something I'm going to have to get used to. What else? Here's a big thing, like a really, really big thing. We had iPads at Spirit. We had JEP FD Pro with the minimal amount of usability on it, I guess you could say. And we had 12 different web pages with 12 different passwords, and it was very hard to kind of talk to a human sometimes to get an issue resolved, or it required a lot of emails. And my time at Spirit was great. I'm not trying to disparage them at all. I felt as though they really did the best with what they had. I truly believe that. Big difference at United is it's like an IT company that flies people around. And what I mean by that is there are so many apps that are all centralized in one place on the iPad with one password, and it gives you the ability to do your job with every single resource available. It's incredible. They have the app, it's like Pilot Mobile, where it has your trip pairing, it has your captain's information, your flight attendant's information, it has gate information, it has aircraft information, it has the aircraft logbooks on there. If there's a write-up on the airplane, it's like a live, it's updated live. So it'll say, hey, the airplane is not good for departure. It has an open write-up, and you can go back in the logbook and look through all of the write-ups. You could pull up your flight plan there. You could talk to the dispatch there. It's incredible. They have SkyPath, where it uses like crowdsourcing. It uses the accelerometer in your iPad to let to give PIREPs to other pilots when there's turbulence. I think American has it. I'm sure Delta has it. Southwest may have it. But we didn't have that at Spirit, and it's just, is it needed for a safe flight? Not necessarily. Is it really nice to have to ensure your flight attendants aren't going to get hurt or your passengers are comfortable because you can find better rides? Absolutely. I mean, it's incredible. So all of stuff like that, it just, United really goes above and beyond, I think, to make sure that you have everything you need to be successful at your job. And that's just really nice, because as a captain at my previous airline, there was a lot of times where I just had to maybe call a few more people or log into a few more different web pages, or just go kind of get my own weather reports, so to speak. And again, Spirit was great. I enjoyed it. They gave us everything we needed for a safe flight, no question there. But this is just, there's a lot more stuff here to help you do your job, which is nice. And I'm an FO now, so I can't imagine how nice it is for the captain to have all of these resources available to you. So that's really nice. Another thing too is, as far as doing your job efficiently and having all those tools to do it, all of the non-flying stuff, like crew resource updates, all these metrics that you can go in and find. There's just so much information to really keep you in the loop of what's going on, not only in the airline, but in the industry as a whole and flight operations wise. So that's just really, really cool to see. And that's something that I'm not really used to. So the last thing is, probably stay on the 737 for a bit. There's apparently Newark has got the best flying in the whole system. 757 is something I like to try before it goes away. 777 and 78 are all airplanes that are based in Newark. Trying to find that happy medium between gaining a little bit of seniority so I can have a schedule that kind of works with all the activities of my 4 daughters and my wife. But I also am kind of tempted to go fly the 75 or the 777 and kind of go do all that European stuff before I get too old and I'm too tired. Kind of want to try that because I also know when the time comes where I can hold 737 captain, I'm probably gonna want to do that as soon as possible. And then once I go in the left seat of the 737, I doubt I'm gonna go to the right seat of the 777 or 7. Maybe I will. I don't know. We'll see. I got a buddy here who's a super senior 777 FO, and he never works. And when he does, he goes to like Tokyo or Dubai and stuff like that. So that's kind of appealing. But I got 20 years to figure that out. For now, I'm just trying to make sure that I get the bleed panel right on the overhead of the 737. But that's where I'm at. That's where I've been. Going to get back to flying the Cub. The Chief annual, I think, is due at the end of December, so I'll be flying that, do some more videos of that stuff. But it's nice to be done with training, back to have kind of a normal-ish schedule while I try to navigate the contract on reserve. So thanks for listening, and any questions or anything about the process, let me know. Be glad to answer them. All right, guys, see ya.